you upset about that?
All right. Well, we're going live. For some reason, we have a picture again, but I don't know why that is. But hey, whatever. We'll still make it work. As long as people can hear, that's all that really matters. Anyway, so welcome to Bother the Father. Again, this is a forum of any questions you may have. This is the time to ask. I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. And if I don't know, I will definitely try. Oh, wait a minute. This is the camera in the rectory office. Why is it connecting to the camera in the rectory office? That's very interesting. I didn't even think that camera was working. Okay, I don't know, whatever. So you're getting a feed of the rectory office right now. I don't know why, but if anyone comes in there and shouldn't be in there, please let us know in the chat or through the file. That's weird. Anyway, I wonder if I can change that. Whatever, I'll figure that out later. Anyway, welcome by the Father. Anyone have any questions they would like to ask? Should we start with the question you had earlier? Or not? The question was asked earlier. We just got the parking lot repaved and repainted, and right now we have lines outside of the garage door here to say no parking. Kind of make very more signs. It's very obvious you should not park in front of these doors. And the question was asked, well, how many people think would we ignore that or park there anyway? I don't know. We'll see. We'll make deal, but just don't park in front of the left-hand side because that's my garage door, and if I get a call from the hospital, I need to get out, right? So I'm not. If someone's dying, don't waste time trying to find out who's parked there. It's almost like parking in front of a ambulance or a fire truck. So please don't do that. So yeah, okay. Got it.
My husband asked, when a question is asked, can you repeat it? Because he's listening and he said he can't hear the question.
I'll try, but I mean, that's also one of the advantages of coming here. That's all I'm saying. We'll do our best, but yes. All right. Question was asked. Can I repeat the question?
Yeah, I was about to say, you want to repeat the question?
Sure. I'll do my best. So very good. All right.
Okay, so yeah, I got a bunch.
Yeah, great.
Little lighthearted first.
Okay.
A couple of weeks ago, Genesis, God and Abraham, before, God is thinking, he says, I heard some things are going on down there, and I want to check it out. So first, I'm giggling there. And then I find that I was maybe the only one in church laughing. Because when Abraham says, hey, God, you wouldn't do it if there's 50 down there.
The
God's
bargaining.
real quick and goes, 50, sure. Yeah, okay, I'll spare one.
Yeah.
Why didn't he just dump to one?
And then, right? And then Abraham's like, well, God, what if there was 45? And God's like, 45, sure. So you'd almost see Abraham going, there's not even 45 good people down there. So then Abraham goes, what about 35? And God's like, yeah, sure. And I'm just seeing this go. Because also Abraham knows, like the line, hey, where's your brother? God already knew the answer.
Right.
So there was like
well, no. I know. I think so. So I think the question there is like, okay, we hear these things in the Bible about how God seems to not know what's happening, or asks these kind of questions, or brings up these things to these figures in the Old Testament that, and so like so for instance, in this issue you're talking about there, John, where Abram is kind of haggling with God about about what's going to happen with Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Why wouldn't God just say like, hey, look, let's just cut to the chase. If there's one good person, we'll be fine, right?
Right.
Well, I think part of the reason that God does this, and it kind of relates to what we heard today in the first reading with Gideon, right? So Gideon is this interesting figure where today we heard that Gideon was approached by God, and he's like, okay, look, just to make sure I know that it's you, wait here while I go get an offering, and then and then of course the angel touches it, it gets consumed and brought up them. But then he gives this like, oh no, I'm gonna die because I've seen God, right? Well, wait a minute. If that was an affirmation you saw God, why would God then just go ahead and kill you? Well, part of that's because it's understood that to actually put our humans' eyes on God, that we're not worthy of that, and because of that unworthiness, it would be just then to be dead, right? Mm-hmm. Also, there's an understanding that if you see these figures, that means you're in heaven, so you're already dead. So it kind of freaks you out a little bit, right? Which is why whenever there's an God always says, be not afraid, right? Don't be afraid. Gideon also, though, had this very interesting dialogue with God when it comes to this fleece, right? It's like, okay, hey, look, just to make sure I know what's going on, make this fleece wet in the morning. And of course, okay, now just make sure it's really Luke, make the area around the fleece wet and not the fleece. Okay. So I think what that goes to show is that it actually tells more about the characters themselves than really God, right? So from that, we can maybe deduce that this Gideon fellow is very self-conscious of himself, right? He's like kind of almost like has an inferiority complex.
Well, he says he's the lowest.
He's the lowest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so if you're talking about a leader of the people that's going to be the judge of Israel to lead them to victory over this invading army, you would want someone that's intelligent. You would want someone that's actually probably good in defenses, someone that's actually good in strategy, someone that's cunning, someone that's actually brave. And that's not him. And he knows it about himself. He's like, I'm not this guy. So I need some affirmation that you're actually doing this to me, right? You're going to actually help me to do that. Whenever we hear of something about maybe a lack of knowledge of God or even an emotion of God, we have to understand that that's kind of put into perspective of human understanding. That we don't know what it means for God to be angry or happy or joyful or even, or sad. What's that?
Or to set a reminder.
Or to be like, hey, what's going on down there, right? This is all for like our benefit, to kind of understand that God is present with us and he interacts with us in the way that he created us. So he interacts with us in a way that we can understand and receive. And I think what's very fascinating is the patience he has with both Abram and with Gideon, because he understands, okay, Abram, I picked you out of all the people. You're having maybe some doubts here because I told you you're going to be a great nation. You don't have an heir. You're getting older. You're probably thinking like, what's going on here, God? So you probably just need this kind of understanding for your own self to understand what my plan is. So this is really more, this haggling is for your benefit, to realize I'm not like the other gods around us. I don't have like this wrath that I really like that comes from me. Even though elsewhere in the Bible it says it says specifically this wrath comes from God, right? When it comes, especially the enemies of Israel, that we're told like in other areas of the Bible that God's wrath flared up against these people. Well, okay, yeah. Is it that God's plan is to protect Israel? Yes. Does that come across as someone observing this as wrath? Well, sure. It's a war. There's violence. There's death happening. And if you didn't know any better, you'd say, well, wow, their God is pretty powerful and he's pretty angry against these people. Right? When in reality, it's the human interaction that's doing it. Did war have to happen for God's plan to come about? Well, could it, and this is always a question that really stems from a lot of people who may read the Bible or not Christians, say, look at all these things your God did that are evil. Well, yeah, I mean, the Bible says explicitly that God did these things. And could have God done this another way to make this come about, like through a miracle, through something else? Probably. But you also understand the mindset of the people at the time, right? That when you are putting your entire faith in the divinity amongst other nations that also put their faith in their own divinities, their own deities, you kind of have to show them what's going on. And in order for them to understand it, and it could be more of an issue of a development of the human mind, development of the human person, that this is a time where violence was just part of life, right? And so even though God didn't necessarily will it, it was necessary for Israel to survive, right? So you could, in many ways, as Catholics, we can interpret it in many different ways. We can say this is a human interpretation of what's going on, of something that's beyond our capacity to understand. I think that's probably the best answer for these things. But you can also say, like, well, yeah, but if you're looking at if Israel is the chosen people, they're the ones that kind of are supposed to bring out this understanding, this reality, this truth. If they get destroyed, well, that doesn't happen anymore. Could God have actually chosen someone else? Well, yeah, but that could also sow doubt in the human mind because, well, look, if God really wanted these people to be the chosen people, He would have protected them. And if you read a lot of these things that happen in these battles, these wars, he minimizes. So in other words, what God does is kind of even like with things like in Judges or with David, he says, okay, you have too many people to fall, because otherwise the glory is going to be attributed to you and not to me. And so what these things are doing, trying to reveal a truth that you guys have these other gods, but our God is the real God. And even for the people of Israel, that took some time to understand. It wasn't until the Babylonian exile that there was understanding, like, oh, wait a minute, this deity that's ours, that we only have this one God that we've been worshiping. Oh, he's the God of all. He has dominion over all these other gods, and even not quote gods in the world. Well, if you think about that, that was like 2,000 years after Moses, right? Even the mind says, even now Moses may have understood that he's the real God, the only God. But for the people actually from that understanding, it took them 2,000 years. So
they were worshiping other things and things they could see.
But I mean, there's always been a remnant of Israel that was worshiping the true God, right? Even like with Elijah, right? Elijah, you can say that when Israel fell out based on their kings, which is funny because tomorrow we're going to hear a passage from Judges about the people wanting to have a king. And we hear that again in the book of Samuel. And it kind of, there's been this like cycle throughout the Old Testament of the people wanting a king. What God's trying to communicate to them is like, look, I'm your king. You don't need this human person because you have a king that's going to look out for you and do what they're supposed to do for you. You don't need this human king like your neighbors do, right? Now, of course, human fickleness, human frailty, God kind of condescends in some way, but that's still part of his plan. But the whole purpose is for God to kind of help the people first understand, no, I am something more than you understand. But he does it in a way that is actually receivable for the people at the time in the circumstance they find themselves. So whenever we hear of an emotion attributed to God, we have to kind of take that with a grain of salt.
He's bending down for us.
Yeah, right. It's really a way to put in human terms what we can only understand from a human perspective, right? So, and that's difficult because there are some very difficult passages that say, like, why did God want war? Well, if anything, you could say that's the only way that God could actually maintain Israel and Judah, to actually be a thing and propagate who he is, to come to the birth of Jesus. And as Christians, we always want to look at the Old Testament through the lens of the New and understand that, well, yeah, the purpose of Israel is to bring about the Savior.
Yeah.
Not just Savior Israel, but our Savior, who is God, right? So God would do the best thing in the best way to make sure that happens, right? And so the other thing we have to understand, which is a little more probably theological than most people would want to admit to, is that God's intellect and knowledge and wisdom is much beyond ours. So even if you say there's suffering that happens in this, yeah, well, I mean, there must be a purpose to that maybe we don't comprehend right now. I think that's a humble and wise approach to what these things in the Old Testament, because it would be very narcissistic to say, I understand everything God was doing there. Well, wait a minute.
Right.
Right. Nobody knows that. Right. So, yeah, I think when you hear those arguments, I think it's important to approach it from different perspectives, but also understand that, like, these are kind of beyond our comprehension. And if anything, we could say these things were done to bring about Christ. And we would also want to say that God would not abandon these people either. There was an opportunity for them too to realize the faith, if anything, in the coming of Jesus, in the resurrection of the dead, right? The descent into hell. So we would say that everyone had opportunity, regardless of the circumstances.
I heard it explained very broadly. If you look at it like God, the loving Father, and this is his people, his children, and he's trying to discipline. He's trying to teach them. So, he permits or allows all these things to happen to them, maybe exile and things like that. And if you step back and follow it over time, you can see how he's teaching them different things at
Yeah.
different times. Like that there's just one God. God didn't bring in like the Trinity right then. First he had to get them to believe and see that there's just one God. Then later on down the line, come Jesus, and then he kind of shows that you see it as a loving father disciplining his children.
Yeah. Discipline is really important in that regard, right? Because that's what God does all throughout the Old Testament, even into the New, right? That He gives us these opportunities for growth. That's not meant for suffering; it's meant for learning. But even a good father out of love would also bring about. I think the other thing we recognize here that it's really a recognition that there's something beyond this life, right? If we were all just complete, materialists and saying, oh, you know what, hey, it's only about this life and that's all that matters. Yeah, that would have the death of all these non-Jewish people, these Gentiles, would seem very cruel and very wrong and unjust and evil. But it's been revealed there's something beyond this life that God has full control over. And so, we would understand that this pain and the suffering, this death wasn't done in vain. It'd only be in vain if these people that did die didn't choose the truth, right, in the moment of their judgment. But that's not up to God. That's up to them, right? That'd be up to those Gentiles that died and went on and finally had revealed to them what the truth is to accept. And is it possible that they would reject it? Yeah, but we don't know that. That's beyond our capacity. We can't even objectively judge. So if you can say like all the Arameans, they're all in hell. I don't know that. I can't say that, right?
None of us can.
Right. Or the Philistines. I don't know.
But Father, is it fair to say that, and I don't think we know this, is it if God and Jesus has been patient, but trying to teach me my whole life what the truth is, like, is the test the whole time I'm alive, or do I get to take the test after my demise real quick? Like, how do we know that?
Well,
right? If I've been making the choice not against, but just to not follow Jesus my whole life.
Right. So
I get hit by a bus.
Yes. So I think okay, let's put it this way.
The choice is different than if you didn't know.
Correct. So the purpose I think of this life is to grow in the virtues which help us to choose Him. So in other words, what this life is, and this is Thomas Aquinas saying this, right? That the life we live, we develop habits. We develop habits of faith, hope, charity, prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude, and all the different virtues that lie under that. We also can maybe develop vices, right? That don't allow us to choose those higher goods, right? So I think the answer to your question there, John, the question was raised like, okay, well, is this a lifelong thing that we're being like, the test is really here now, or is there a test at the end of our life? I think the answer is both and. I think it's both and. Because I would imagine that even, so the point that Renee was making, what we're going to be judged on what we know to be true, and we know to be good, and we know to be, unitive and harmonious, and that exists, and we'll be judged on that, right? Based on our own limited capacity, our own limited ability. And I think at the moment of our death, we still have one final choice.
It also depends on, like, why you weren't following Jesus. Were you wounded by something?
Right.
I mean, so God's merciful, so He would understand your wounds, and there's a lot of people that are wounded and fall away from the church, but doesn't mean that they're going to hell.
Right. And I think that's where the virtue of religion comes into play. Like people tend to shy away from that word religion. Religion is not just about the life to come. It's also living a good life here on earth. So you're free to make that choice when your time on this world comes to an end. So can someone who's spiritual but not religious make that choice? Sure. Would it be harder for them because they don't really recognize the truth of God? Even though I believe in higher power, this Trinity thing, Jesus, that's not really within my purview of my spirituality. Can I still maybe see that though at the moment? I imagine you would. Is it harder to make that choice based on the way you lived your life? I would imagine it would be. Does that mean it's impossible for you to make that choice? No. Right? And that's why, it's hard for those, like, let's say Catholics who have fallen away. Well, you're going to be kind of judged on that, right? As far as like what you knew to be true and what you rejected and what you accepted.
Yeah.
And so, like, especially like talking about this last week's gospel, we have people like cafeteria Catholics that like, well, I believe in the whole immigration thing, but this whole pro-life thing, I'm not really sure. Or, yeah, deference to the poor, that makes a lot of sense, but, I don't know about the environment, right? These are all teachings of the church that we should, hold to be true and do our best to uphold and live. So what do you
we should all be on the same page.
Exactly right.
These are the
Exactly
big
right.
ones.
Right. But that's the problem is that, well, are you going to be judged on how well you upheld babies in the womb or those at the end of their life or the death penalty or how well you treated the environment and people around you to hold up, to ensure the future of the next generation? Or how well do we accept people that are escaping persecutions in their own countries and treat them as brothers just with dignity?
Different from us.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the problem, is especially as Americans, that we kind of have this cafeteria Catholicism. That should scare all of us, because none of us do that perfectly.
Yeah.
So again, we don't know the mind of God. We don't know how other people can be judged. All I know is what I know and what I know to be true and how well I actually live that. For everyone else, I don't know. Right? And for me, I'm going to be judged on how well I actually present that to people and help them understand it. Right? So I think it was funny at our catechist meeting last week, Don made a really good point that, as catechists, you're going to be judged on how well you present the faith. And not only that, but how well you live what you teach, right? There's a truth there. So yeah, it's hard.
It just, God is all loving, and we don't know. I mean, he killed his own son.
Well,
He allowed his own son to die on the cross.
Right.
He knew it was going to happen. But I just, like, if somebody just chooses to just do the wrong thing all the time, I don't see in their soul, when they get down to ask, how their soul is just going to flip, right? Their inside is just going to flip. I would hope that everybody just flip.
Yeah, well,
Right.
I mean, that's the hope. Well, that's right. The hope is that nobody's in hell. Their hope is nobody is in hell.
Right.
Right, but I don't know that for sure.
If you're meeting up with
The
life,
possibilities of someone being in hell are good. I mean, this weekend we're going to hear the gospel about the narrow path, right? Well, there's a reason why they say the path to hell is very wide, because it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy, right? And how often do we live our life on easy instead of doing what's hard? I think in many ways, because of our fallen nature, our default is easy. Now, that doesn't mean it's unforgivable. That doesn't mean that God won't forgive us if we're truly contrite. And I think that's what comes into play here. Is it possible for someone who's lived a life of debauchery, murder, theft, whatever, to be sorry for that and then their death?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. But I can't necessarily observe that, right, at the moment somebody is dead. God can. So, amen.
Right.
They'll say that the road to hell is lit with the skulls of bishops.
Oh my
The skulls of bishops. I heard that. That's more. I think it's more medieval devotion. I'm not sure. But yeah. Yeah, right. Well, again, because bishops are held to a higher standard. That's right. I mean, it's hard.
So I have a question
Great.
about, with the new bishop being named in Jefferson City.
Yes, Father O'Donnell.
O'Donnell, yes, a good Irish.
Yeah, very good Irish. From Omaha. Yeah.
So how does that come about? Is there somebody in the U.S. who says they might be good candidates? Is
So-
there the local bishop?
Yeah, usually what happens is from my understanding, again, I'm not privy to the full process, but my understanding is the nuncio would submit 3 names. He usually consults with the particular metropolitan from the area.
So the nuncio is in Rome,
No, the nuncio is
Nuncio.
is in the country.
in
So
the country.
we,
Okay.
every country has a papal nuncio, right? That represents the pope and those things, right? So the nuncio would be contacted. He usually would contact the metropolitan, which
Okay.
is the local bishops over like the over the entire. So the way that the hierarchy is set up, you have bishops, archbishops, and then you have a metropolitan bishop who kind of oversees what they call suffrage dioceses. So like here in Missouri, Archbishop Rosansky is the metropolitan.
Okay.
And under his suffrage diocese would be Jeff City, Kansas City, Missouri, and Springfield, right? So typically the metropolitan, maybe the other bishops in that area will be consulted and say, okay, I need 3 names. They call it triumvirate.
Okay.
Give me 3 names, right? Maybe other bishops are consulted. There's really no rhyme or reason. It's kind of up to the nuncio who they want to talk to. 3 names are submitted. They go to Rome. The dicastery for bishops will look at it and say, okay, well, we like these. Maybe we like 2 of these candidates. We all 3. Maybe we like none of them. They go to the Holy Father and say, well, here's what we got for the United States for this diocese. But then the Holy Father can do whatever he wants. He can say, okay, thank you for that, the head of the dicastery, but I like this name. And maybe he might consult with some bishops or cardinals in the area, probably Cardinal Supich or, some of the other cardinals, maybe one down in Houston, I can't remember his name. From that, then he'll make a determination. Then he goes back to the nuncio and says, okay, either give me 3 new names or, this one sounds good. So let's go with them, right? There is somewhat politics going on. I mean, it's hard not to have that in any organization. You trust that the Holy Spirit is guiding this process. I don't know much about Father O'Donnell. I hear he's a good priest. Good. I don't know.
Young,
He's from Omaha. No idea.
born in '69.
Yeah, I don't know. Sure. I don't really care though because he's not my bishop. So that's all I really care about. But he will be under the tutelage, the guidance, of Archbishop Rosansky, right? So I'm sure the Archbishop was consulted. I'm sure he was probably, even the names were probably given to him at some point. I can't imagine that wouldn't have happened.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, so like I said, there may be some dicastery, and depending on the Pope, because the Pope probably has certain people he would trust and he would contact too. There would be some kind of dialogue, regardless.
Wasn't that one of Pope Leo's jobs before he became
He was
Pope?
before he was the Pope. He was the head of dicastery of bishops.
Okay.
So he like 2 years, but his job was to actually like submit those names to the Holy Father and say, "Here's what we think," and so yeah. Oftentimes, the Holy Father probably was like, "Great." More of a formality, sure, whatever. Because I would say with every pontificate, but I think most popes are like, if I'm putting you in that position, I trust you, so I'm going to kind of say you're probably know better than I do.
Thought that process started even,
It can.
they have like.
It
lists.
can.
So,
Well, I mean, not necessarily. Well, yes and no. Even though a bishop has to submit their retirement at 75, that doesn't mean they're actually accepted.
Yeah.
So, is it possible for a bishop that's like, I'm good, sure, and then maybe there might be some also channels say, I think I'm done. Oh, okay. Now what? Right?
But Jeff City didn't retire. He got
That's what I'm saying, right? If that were the case,
okay.
you would imagine they had someone.
Okay.
I don't think that happened though. I mean, it took a few months. Now, granted, we had a new
We had
pope,
new Pope.
so I mean, that kind of threw a wrench in things. But even like Bishop Ruvatuso. I should say Ruvatuso. I don't know if anyone saw that coming. And especially to go from an auxiliary, that's quite a. Even though Mobile is not necessarily a huge archdiocese, it's still an archdiocese. It's still a metropolitan. So I imagine that's because of Bishop Ruvatuso's, Ruvatuso's canon law background. So all you can say is better him than I, but or better him than me. But I mean, it's I don't know. There was a lot of priests I think wouldn't be elevated or wouldn't be moved because there was nobody advocating for him in Rome, amongst the other bishops. But I guess he struck a chord with Pope Leo. Good, when that would have happened or how that would happen, I don't know. So, but good. I mean, these priests are also elevated. I mean, usually that's going to be coming from your local bishop. If there's going to be no auxiliary, that would come from Archbishop Brzezinski primarily, I would imagine.
Oh, it would?
Yeah, because it's an auxiliary bishop. Usually an auxiliary, it'd be like taking I would have to kind of initiate that, right? And there's factors you want. Necessity. Would life for me be better with an associate pastor? Sure. Can I afford to have one? No. Do I really kind of need one? Not really. On the responsibilities we have here at St. Anne, we're not really big enough to really kind of justify that. So in the same way, the Archbishop has to kind of make that determination for Archdiocese. And again, the Archbishop is up. I'm just speculating here. This is not something I know. I'm just saying this. If I'm the Archbishop, I'm looking at this saying, well, I already have this vicariate system set up. I have other bishops in my area that can take care of like sacramental issues. I really need an auxiliary bishop. Now, we've always had one in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, but governance too. So, and if I were to take someone internally from this archdiocese, that means I have to kind of backfill whoever I choose for that. And do I want to do that? We're not really busting with vocations here in the archdiocese. I don't know. Again, that's completely up to him, and he's got to make his own determination. And he knows more than I do what he needs and what's going to be beneficial.
We're doing better than most as far as
What's that?
we're doing better.
Sure. I mean, yeah. Maybe you could say, well, we'll pull someone from other dioceses. Well, that even cause another issue, right? Okay, our neighbors aren't doing so great with their vocations. Maybe Wichita, or maybe Omaha or Lincoln, maybe. But even for them, based on their population, they're doing right. But even they aren't necessarily feeling need in their dioceses or archdioceses. Yeah, I don't know. Again, the Archbishop will know better than I as far as what he needs and what he wants to do. Let's just pray it's not me. That's all I'm saying. I just don't want to. It's just not. Put that out there. Good. For the auxiliary, yeah. I mean, we've had before he went to Belleville. There's been a couple others, I think, but usually if we've had an auxiliary, at least one auxiliary has come from internal. Yes, but that doesn't mean it has to be. I mean, tradition is good, but it's also like there could be practical issues here, right? So I don't know.
You made a comment in your homily today about as women vocations
Yeah.
Reuben,
Yeah.
men's.
Yeah,
which you
there-
and I had never heard that.
Yeah, there's actually
before.
been kind of all throughout the history of the church where women religious have thrived, the priesthood also has thrived. So the idea there, I think, or at least the correlation, maybe causation, who knows, is that the women religious are praying for vocations, right? So if they're dedicating their devotional life to that, well, God's going to answer that because He's not going to deny His bride, especially those who are virtuous and loving and are true brides. So yeah, I think there's a truth to that. We have some great women religious here in the Archdiocese of St. Louis. We have some thriving orders. We also have some that are dying, right? So, yeah, I think that's why I tell, especially our young ladies who are serving and even in school, we need women religious, which is also why next month we're starting a vocation discussion and dinner for our young people from middle school through high school. It's going to be here. We're inviting some of the sisters from the Franciscan St. George, the Dragon Slayers from down the street, to come and talk. We're going to probably separate the sexes for some of the meetings, guys and girls, lay people to step up and maybe give some witness on their, because, we look at vocation, not just religious and priesthood, but also good married life. So, yeah, we're looking to do that on the 25th of September, will be our first night.
Will you do it every week? Or
Once a month. We determined the third Thursday, but that particular Thursday, so yes, we can move back, so it's sure fine. So the 25th of September is going to be our first day. I don't know who's going to come. So probably next week I'll be advocating that as well as for new servers. So we're going to probably looking at that coming up. So hopefully we get some of your young members here to kind of right. If anything, it's free meal, work. But we need to get numbers and OSVPs and that kind of stuff for our orders. So hopefully we hear back from a few of them. Yeah. But yeah, no, there's always been that sort of history where wherever the women religious, yeah, that's been a truth. Yeah, that's been kind of propagated throughout history. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense too. Who are the ones that made the ministry run? It was the women. So, yeah, that makes sense, right? Yeah. Great. Questions, comments, concerns, heresies?
John, you said you had a whole pocket.
Well, it's not real big, but I'm listening on the radio, and I forget who the father of the priest was, but he allegory talking about how Adam was naming all the animals.
Oh yeah,
and God sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So I think the father on the radio was saying it was because Adam was so in tune with what God wanted. Those were the and Adam was in tune before the original sin. It was because when I was reading it in the Bible, I'm thinking, God just let Adam name everything.
Yeah. So the question is about the passage in Adam is given the authority to name all the animals, right? Which is dominion over creation, right? And so the question there is like, wow, that seems very interesting that God would do that, and so that shows maybe that God and how unified Adam and God were. Yeah, I think that's true. I've often, it's funny, we're for Respect Life Apostolate, I'm their spiritual director, and we have formation once a month, and we've been walking through speeches, the Wednesday audiences that John Paul II had to build up the theology of the body. So, because the theology of the body is based on these audiences that John 1979 through like 1984, every Wednesday he would give like a short kind of catechesis on Genesis and how that applies to our human sexuality. And the naming of the animals was actually a way for men to understand their original solitude. So in other words, the purpose behind God allowing Adam to do this was, first off, in line with each other. it's hard for us to understand how that was the experience.
Yeah.
We're not born into that. We don't know how that was because we were born in the state because of our first parents that put us in this state. Because of that fallen nature, I think and this is what John Paul is that the fall of man didn't just rupture the relationship between God and humanity. It also ruptured the relationship between God and man and each other, woman, man and creation. Also within man, his psyche, right? That there was a great split that was such a monumental destruction that we can't really comprehend it because we don't know how that was before. But he argued too that the purpose of this naming by Adam was for Adam to realize that he was the only one like himself. So as these animals were coming up from being named, a little bit different, but they're the same. So these two lions, well, that one has one doesn't, and this one has parts that are that. Okay, well, lions, but okay, that's interesting. Oh, these elephants, okay, they have these trunks and everything, but also they're okay. But there's also many of them, and okay, that's weird. Gerbils, okay, well, there's a lot of those gerbils, and the purpose of this was him to completely understand, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm alone, one like me, which is when God created Eve, right? So in other words, I think what that shows is how we're designed. We are designed to experience and to grow in that experience. It also raises an into the trees of life and the knowledge of good and evil. Because people could rightly ask, why? If God seems good, have eternal life, it seems like a good idea. To have this, why would knowledge be bad? Why would God create that, then say, prohibit that from his greatest creations to receive it? Well, the philosophical answer may be, well, maybe he was trying to develop them to prepare themselves to finally receive it at some point. So in other words, maybe that prohibition, it was a temporal prohibition until they were ready to receive it, as Adam had to be ready to receive the gift of Eve. But he had to understand that he needed Eve to receive it. In the same way, it seems that maybe God was trying to help them understand what they needed before he actually gave it to them. And not only need it, how to receive it well. So, unfortunately, we'll never know, at least not until we're with God, right, to understand that fully. But that was, John Paul II would argue that was the purpose of the naming, was, yeah, I think you're right, because of the harmonious nature between, obviously God was one direct, but because it exists in the mind of Adam, it automatically exists in the mind of God, right? Because nothing could exist without God's knowledge of it. So, but this was really more for the benefit of Adam than it was for God.
Figuring it out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Genesis is actually chock full of depth. That even like, when you look at those first two chapters, even the third chapter, there's a lot going on there. Reading, it's just like, okay, God created. I mean, in general, you can say, yeah, first understanding that God created all this and sustains it. Yeah, but there's a lot more about the relationship between man and God that was revealed in that than, right? Depth. And even the fall. I mean, it's interesting that after the fall, I think we talked about this a little bit, that, God asks a very interesting question. Go back to your first question we started this, right? With like, okay, well, when God does all this, he says, Adam and Eve, where are you? Well, yeah, does that mean that God didn't know where they were? Well, no. Well, then why would God ask that question? I think, again, he was trying to prompt them to take responsibility and ownership of what they did. Would have done that, what would have happened to humanity? If what they did, well, we were naked, so we hid. Well, who told you that? Okay, well, hold on now. this woman you gave me, look, you gave me the woman. This is why I put that out. You're the one that did this. Well, she gave me this fruit. Oh, yeah, I'm not gonna take the fruit, whatever. Okay, well, hold on. Now, wait a second. This serpent that, hey, the serpent you put here, right? I mean, you made that. Obviously, it wouldn't be here if you didn't make it. Well, it tricked me. Instead of just saying, I'm sorry. I know now I shouldn't have. Would God not have forgiven them? Right. I mean, I would say, I would imagine. But what do they do? It's not my fault. You think it's really your fault. If you want to think about this, it's really you that did this, not me. Where have we heard that before?
Yeah.
Right? Even to the extent of like, even a generation later with, Abel. First question, where's your brother?
Mm-hmm.
Does God not know where Abel is? Of course he does. What does Cain do? Am I my brother's keeper, buddy? I mean, come on. Hey, man. Because the answer is, yeah, you are. Whereas if you just been like, yeah, oh boy, I just got so upset. And who's he upset about? Who's he upset with? Was it really Abel? Or himself?
Himself, right?
Because Abel gave the first fruits. That's why God accepted it. Cain was given like, I got this stuff lying around. Here you go. There's a lot of depth in those first 4 chapters of Genesis that people just kind of gloss over, right?
Because we've heard him so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. Or, I mean, often too, I think people look at it as fable. It's more of like, it's myth. Myth just means beginning. But there's such an association with like, mythical things, like imaginary things. Like, okay, well, Aesop's fable, it's like Aesop's fable. It's meant to give like a tale. Okay, we as Catholics can hold that. But I think if you look at deeper, it's like, wow, there's a lot going on here that not only kind of reveal certain things about our own nature now, but also the relationship that God has with us. That it wasn't God that brought about our downfall. We do it to ourselves every day. So, yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. A lot of insight there John Paul II has. But you also have almost a philosophy degree to read it, too. So it's really...
He also has what?
You almost have to have a philosophy degree to read it.
Philosophy.
The key to John Paul II is take paragraph by paragraph and try to paraphrase down to like a sentence that he's trying to get across. And that's very hard to do sometimes. Because the terms he uses are very philosophical. Without that background, that's hard. Good.
Thanks.
Very good. Well,
deep subject.
yeah. Cast out in the deep today. It's really good. Good time. All right. Well, next week we still have God the Father, I think. Yeah. It's the day after the Feast of St. Louis. So that'll be interesting. It'll be good. So yeah, we'll meet again next week. I'm looking for topics for September. Not really sure yet. The first Tuesday in September is the 2nd, so it's the day after Labor Day. So I'm trying to figure out what might be a good topic for that. If anyone has any ideas, please let me know in the comments or email me. Let me know, and we can talk about it. So thanks for coming, everybody. Hope you have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
My pleasure.